Picture this. A sleek, black car, silent as a shadow, glides through the cracked streets of a neighborhood that time seems to have forgotten. Its polished body reflects the tired faces of old brick buildings and a sky the color of faded jeans. The car stops. A man in a perfectly tailored suit steps out, his shoes worth more than a month's rent in any of the weary houses on this block. But he isn't looking at the decay around him. His eyes are fixed on one small house, the one with a porch that sags like a tired sigh. He's looking for a memory, a ghost. He's looking for a promise he made with a starving belly and the desperate, heartfelt sincerity that only a child can have. It was a promise whispered to a little girl who, with trembling hands, gave her her last piece of bread. He told her he'd be back. He told her he'd be rich, and he told her he would marry her. But that was 20 years ago. In a world that moves so fast, does she even remember the face of the starving boy he used to be? And more importantly, what happens when a childhood promise, forged in kindness and desperation, crashes head first into the cold, hard reality of adult life? The world is full of promises. Most of them disappear like morning mist, but some promises are different. They're anchors. They're debts of the soul. This is the story of one of those promises, a journey from the absolute bottom to the dizzying heights of success, all fueled by the memory of a single act of kindness. It's a story that asks a powerful question. Can a bond formed in poverty survive the weight of wealth, the passage of 2 decades, and the chasm between 2 vastly different lives? To understand the promise, you have to understand the hunger that created it. 20 years ago, this neighborhood wasn't just humble, it was a place of deep, biting poverty. For a 10-year-old boy named Leo, the world was a series of sharp, painful feelings. The gnawing emptiness in his stomach was a constant companion. The cold seeped through his threadbare clothes and settled deep in his bones. But worse than all of that was the feeling of being invisible. He was a ghost in his own life, a small shadow moving through a world that didn't seem to have a place for him. This was a community caught in a cycle of hardship. In places like this, economic instability isn't just an event, it's the air you breathe. These communities often face a combination of challenges, including underfunded schools, substandard housing, and a lack of jobs, which makes survival, let alone success, a daily battle. The dream isn't about getting rich, it's about making it to tomorrow. For many, marriage itself is seen less as a starting point and more as a far-off luxury. Sociologists have a term for this, the capstone marriage, an achievement you place on your life only after a certain level of financial stability is miraculously reached. For a child like Leo, who didn't even have a reliable meal, a stable future was as fantastical as a fairy tale. His family was a ghost too. A father lost to the streets, a mother whose face was a permanent mask of exhaustion, her love buried under layers of worry. They drifted from one cramped space to another, always one step from eviction, always a step behind hope. And then there was Maya. Maya lived in the same world of cracked sidewalks, but her home had something Leo's lacked, a sliver of light. Her family struggled too, but there was a resilience there. There was the smell of something cooking, the sound of her mother's quiet humming. And in Maya, there was a well of kindness that seemed impossibly deep for a 9-year-old who had so little herself. She had bright, perceptive eyes that saw things other people missed. She saw the stray cats and the old man who struggled with his groceries. And one sweltering afternoon, she saw Leo. He'd collapsed in the shade of a big oak tree, the world turning into a gray blur. He'd eaten nothing in 2 days. The heat was pressing down, and the gnawing in his stomach was a roaring beast. He was ready to just give up. That's when a small shadow fell over him. He looked up and saw her. Maya stood there holding a small paper bag. She wasn't looking at him with pity, but with something like recognition, as if she understood the beast roaring inside him. Without a word, she sat down, opened the bag, and took out a simple peanut butter sandwich. To Leo, it was a king's feast. She took a small bite, her eyes still on him. He could smell it, and his stomach crunched with a pain that was almost unbearable. He quickly looked away, ashamed of the raw hunger he knew was written all over his face. Then he heard a rustle. She had torn the sandwich in half. She held one half out to him. "Here," she whispered. Leo stared at it. He couldn't understand. In his world, you didn't share. You couldn't afford to. He looked from the bread to her face and saw no trick, but a quiet sincerity. He saw she was giving him not just food, but a piece of her own survival. Studies and social observations often highlight how women, especially in situations of poverty, are socialized to prioritize the needs of others, even when they themselves are in a fragile state. In that moment, Maya was living that selfless spirit, sharing from her own scarcity in an act of pure empathy. Slowly, his grimy hand reached out and took the bread. His fingers brushed against hers, a spark of human connection in a world of cold indifference. He didn't say thank you. The word was stuck in his throat. He just ate, devouring it in 3 desperate bites. It was just food. It was life. It was a declaration that he wasn't invisible. Someone had seen him. Maya watched him with a small, sad smile. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, 2 children on the edge of the world, bound by a single, selfless act. It was a moment that would plant a seed in Leo's soul, the seed of a promise he didn't even know he was about to make. That first half sandwich wasn't the last. It became their quiet ritual. Maya never sought him out, but she always seemed to know where he'd be, huddled behind a dumpster, sitting on a crumbling wall, or under that same oak tree. She'd appear with an apple, a few crackers, or another shared sandwich, always with the same silent understanding. Their friendship wasn't built on words. It was a language of gestures and shared glances. For Leo, Maya was more than food. It was the only person who saw him as a person, not a problem. She never asked about his family or where he slept. She just saw him. In her presence, his shame began to fade, replaced with a fierce, protective gratitude. For Maya, helping Leo gave her a sense of purpose that defied their bleak surroundings. She saw the pride in his eyes and learned to offer the food as a shared meal, an unspoken pact between equals. She was teaching him how to receive kindness, and he was teaching her the power of giving it. But their fragile world was about to shatter. The eviction notice finally appeared on the door. There was nowhere else to go. His mother had heard a rumor of work in a city hundreds of miles away, a desperate gamble they had to take. The news hit Leo like a punch to the gut. Leaving the one person who offered him any stability was terrifying. The world beyond this neighborhood was a dark unknown, and Maya was his only light. Their farewell happened on a grim, overcast evening. He found Maya on her porch steps, as if she was waiting for him. She saw the hollow look in his eyes and knew immediately. "You're going away," she said, not as a question, but as a fact. He could only nod, a painful lump in his throat. This was it. The invisibility was coming back, and he was afraid it would swallow him whole this time. He felt a desperate need to give her something, to leave a piece of himself behind, a tether this departure couldn't break. But he had nothing. Tears welled in his eyes. "I have to go," he choked out. Maya looked at him, her own eyes glistening. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle, a whole sandwich this time, and a bruised apple. "For the trip," she said softly. He clutched it like a lifeline. In that moment, something inside him broke. It was a surge of raw emotion, gratitude, fear, and a child's unwavering sense of justice. She had given him hope. He couldn't just disappear. He had to repay her. But how? Then the promise poured out of him. "I'll come back," he he said, his voice raw with an intensity that startled them both. He grabbed her hands. I'll come back for you, Maya. I'm going to get rich. I'll make so much money that we'll never be hungry again. And when I do, when I come back, he took a deep, shuddering breath. I'm going to marry you. I promise. I'll marry you. It was a child's promise, born from a child's logic. In his world of constant instability, marriage was the ultimate symbol of security. It reflects a view common in low-income communities where marriage is seen as a capstone, the final piece you put in place after you've built a stable life. For a 10-year-old boy, promising to marry her was the highest honor he could imagine, the ultimate way to repay his debt. Maya stared at him, her eyes wide, swept up in the raw emotion of the moment. A part of her might have seen it as a fantasy, but another part felt the undeniable weight of his oath. She didn't laugh. She just squeezed his fingers and gave a small, solemn nod. A horn blared. It was time to go. He let go of her hands, turned, and ran toward the rusty truck without looking back. As the truck rumbled away, Maya stood on her porch, holding the memory of his words. For Leo, that promise was now the only thing he owned. It was his mission, his North Star. For Maya, it was a strange, beautiful secret that would slowly fade over the years like the echo of a half-forgotten dream. The world outside their neighborhood was even colder than Leo had imagined. The next decade was a brutal struggle for survival. He and his mother drifted from one grim city to another. He worked jobs meant for grown men, hauling crates, sweeping floors, washing dishes. Every day was a battle. But now he had a new enemy, despair. Through it all, the promise to Maya was his armor. In his darkest moments, he would close his eyes and see her face, her hand holding out a piece of bread. He'd hear his own voice. I'll come back for you. I'll be rich. I'll marry you. The promise wasn't just about her anymore. It was a vow to become someone worthy of her kindness. It gave his suffering a purpose. Leo was different. He had a focus that was almost unnerving. While others spent their small earnings on fleeting distractions, he saved every coin. He didn't just work, he watched. He learned how systems operated, how money moved. He devoured library books, teaching himself economics and history. His education was stolen in moments between grueling shifts, but his hunger for knowledge was insatiable. His break came not from luck, but from pure, dogged opportunism. While working construction, he saw how much scrap metal was being thrown away. He started collecting it and selling it. It started small. Then he negotiated deals with foremen. By 18, he had a rusty pickup truck. By 20, he had his own small salvage company. The invisible boy was now a business owner. He worked with a relentless ferocity, taking calculated risks that paid off. He expanded from salvage into demolition, then into real estate, buying the same kind of derelict properties he once slept in and transforming them. The rags to riches story is a powerful American narrative, but the reality is that such social mobility is incredibly difficult and rare. Leo's rise wasn't magic, it was the exception, a testament to sheer grit and an unwavering refusal to accept his fate. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Maya's life followed a quieter path. She grew up. The memory of the starving boy, Leo, was a faint one, a poignant but distant story. She never expected to see him again. Life isn't a storybook. Maya's life was shaped by the pressures faced by women in her community. She saw friends become mothers young, their own dreams put on hold. She also faced the challenges of being a young black woman. Her family was wary of her helping the strange, fierce white boy all those years ago, a subtle caution born from a desire to protect her. Research shows that even as acceptance for interracial relationships grows, families can still be a source of opposition and concern, creating a real hurdle for couples. Maya did have relationships, but none felt right. She had a quiet strength that made her unwilling to settle. She wasn't waiting for a prince. She was slowly building her own little kingdom. She got a job at a local nonprofit, helping families navigate the same social systems that had once failed Leo. She found her purpose in small, daily acts of service, becoming an anchor in her community. Her life wasn't a story of riches, but one of resilience. She lived with her mother in the same small house with the sagging porch. She was content. She had built a good life, a real life. She had no idea that hundreds of miles away, a man she barely remembered was building a fortune, all with her face as his guiding star, about to return to fulfill a promise she had long since forgotten. One boy's obsessive quest to repay a debt of kindness, and one woman's quiet story of resilience. But can two paths that have diverged so dramatically ever truly meet again? Can a promise made by children withstand the weight of 20 years in separate lives? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you're moved by stories of unbreakable bonds, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens when Leo's world finally collides with Maya's. The arrival was an event. In a neighborhood where a new car was a decade-old sedan, a gleaming luxury vehicle was like a spaceship landing. People peeked through their curtains. Kids stopped their games to stare. The car was a symbol of a world so foreign it felt like an intrusion. When Leo stepped out, the contrast was even jarrier. The suit, the shoes, the quiet confidence of a man used to being in charge. But his eyes, scanning the dilapidated street, held a nervous energy. He was a king returning to a forgotten battlefield with no idea what he would find. He walked past the old oak tree, then the ghost of the dumpster where he'd scrounged for scraps. Finally, he stood before the house. It was smaller than he remembered, more weathered, but it was the one. The porch still sagged. He took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened. And there she was, Maya. She was older, of course. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore a simple dress, her hands smudged with dirt from her garden. Her bright, perceptive eyes widened slightly. She saw a rich stranger on her crumbling porch. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but cautious. All the speeches Leo had practiced for years vanished. His heart hammered. "Maya?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. She furrowed her brow. "Yes, do I know you?" He was a 10-year-old boy again, desperate and invisible. It's Leo," he said. She stared, the name meaning nothing. "I'm sorry, I don't think—" "The bread! 20 years ago, I was starving. You shared your bread with me." He pointed towards the old oak tree. "Right over there." Then a flicker of recognition, a slow, dawning bewilderment. She remembered a skinny, fiercely proud boy with hungry eyes. A ghost. She looked at the polished, powerful man in front of her and tried to connect the two. It was impossible. "Leo?" she whispered, the name now a question of disbelief. "I told you I'd come back," he said, relief washing over him. "I promised." But her shock quickly turned into a deep, unsettling confusion. This wasn't a heartwarming movie reunion. It was just strange. The front door opened wider, and Maya's mother appeared, her eyes immediately sharp with suspicion. "Maya, who is this?" she asked. "Mom, this is Leo," Maya said, the name still feeling unreal. "We knew each other as kids." Leo's relief curdled into anxiety. He had done his part. He was here. He was rich. He expected, what? A joyful embrace? He didn't expect this wall of confusion. For him, the promise was the center of his life. For her, he was realizing with a sickening jolt, it was a forgotten artifact from a painful past. This tension reflects the real challenges interracial couples can face, where family opposition, especially when combined with class differences, can be a major hurdle. To Maya's mother, Leo wasn't the boy her daughter fed. He was a wealthy, white stranger whose presence felt like a threat. "I've come to keep my promise," Leo said, his voice regaining its usual command. A mistake he instantly regretted. He sounded like he was announcing a corporate takeover. Maya took a step back. "Promise? Leo, we were children. That was a lifetime ago." He had planned for his return for 20 years, but he had never planned for this. He never planned for her to have a life of her own, where his grand gesture wasn't a welcome miracle, but a startling complication. The fortress of wealth he had built suddenly felt like a cage, separating him from the one person he built it for. The days that followed were a delicate, awkward dance. The cinematic reunion Leo imagined was replaced by quiet, stilted conversations on Maya's sagging porch. He had to learn to shed the armor of a CEO, and she had to look past the intimidating symbols of his success. He learned about her life, the quiet heroism of her work, her deep commitment to the community he'd been so desperate to escape. He saw her not as a damsel to be rescued, but as a resilient woman who had built a meaningful life. He was humbled. His plan to shower her with riches suddenly seemed arrogant. She learned about his journey, the obsessive drive that fueled him and the scars it had left. She began to understand that his promise wasn't just about her, it was the anchor that kept him from being swept away. The real challenge, though, came from the outside. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Her family's suspicion was a heavy cloud. This mirrors the real-world struggles where couples must constantly navigate and defend their relationship from family disapproval, a process that can take a significant emotional toll. Was this a rich man's whim? Was he trying to buy their daughter? Leo realized his wealth, the very thing he thought would win her, was his biggest obstacle. So he started showing up not as a billionaire, but as a person. He left the car parked blocks away. He traded his suits for jeans. He showed up at her nonprofit not with a giant check, but with a hammer to help repair a porch. He used his resources, but quietly, through her. He made an anonymous donation to an after-school program. He secured building materials for a community garden. He wasn't trying to be a savior. He was trying to be a partner. He was showing her he valued what she valued. Slowly, the walls came down. Maya's family saw a man who treated her with profound respect. They saw him listen to her, truly listen. They saw her smile, always quiet and reserved, become brighter when he was around. They began to see the ghost of the determined little boy in the eyes of the powerful man. The proposal, when it finally came, was nothing like the 10-year-old Leo had imagined. It happened on a quiet evening, sitting on that same front porch. "When I was a boy," he began, his voice soft, "I promised to marry you because it was the only way I knew how to say thank you. I spent 20 years thinking I had to become a king to be worthy of the girl who shared her bread with me." He took her hand. "But I was wrong. I just needed to become a man who understood what you were really giving me. It wasn't just bread. It was compassion. It was dignity. You saved me, Maya, not just from starvation, but from invisibility." He looked into her eyes, all the wealth and power falling away. "I'm here not to fulfill a debt," he said. "The debt I owe you is unpayable. I'm here because the man I am today is in love with the woman you are now. I don't want to give you a castle. I want to build a life with you. Maya, will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she gave a radiant, genuine smile. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Leo, I will." Their story isn't just a fairy tale of a poor boy returning rich. Those rags to riches tales often romanticize the brutal reality of social mobility, which for most is an incredibly difficult, if not impossible, climb. Their story resonates because it taps into something more real. It's a testament to the enduring power of a single act of kindness, a ripple that can cross decades. It's a reflection of real-world struggles against hardship and prejudice, where commitment and love become the ultimate triumph. It's a story that reminds us that the greatest promises aren't about wealth or status, but about seeing the worth in another person and carrying that light with you always.